What's up everyone? Nick from ResoNix Sound Solutions here with a quick video before we get into this. I just want to show you or remind you of one of our really helpful lesser known products, which is ResoNix Barrier. ResoNix Barrier is a modern mass-loaded vinyl noise barrier replacement that's typically used for soundproofing vehicles. But I know if you're watching this, you're probably not interested in doing full soundproofing in your vehicle. You're probably more interested in doing a sound system installation. So for those doing a sound system installation where you're going to be doing door-mounted mid-bass drivers like most vehicles come with, you already know you're gonna have to fabricate block-off panels to block off the access holes that are featured on the inner door skin. This is so you can create a quote-unquote sealed enclosure and prevent cancellation from the rear mid-bass driver wave and the front wave from interacting with each other. But the problem is, most vehicles have difficult shapes or compounding curves that make doing traditional ABS plastic sheets very difficult or very time consuming. If you've had a modern Honda or Mustang or Camaro or anything of that sort, you already know heat molding plastic like that to make it conform to your inner door skin is a bore of a job. That's where ResoNix Barrier comes in. It makes a very quick job of this, but is great. It's very thin and it's moldable, but it's still stiff and rigid enough to act as a barrier for that inner door skin application. You can see it here in this install right here, and you can also see it in this 2011 Camaro. Now, I'll even show it to you. Most might think, well, what's really going on there? You can see this shape that's inset right in. Well, this is what it looked like before. This shape that's inset into the inner door skin is actually where the door panel resides into. So just doing a sheet of rigid plastic over this would prevent the door panel from being able to be installed again. So what I did was I took ResoNix Barrier, laid it right over the top, and just molded it right to shape, and it was done. I used strips of ResoNix CLD squares to seal the edges, and it took about maybe 15 to 20 minutes to get this door done, as opposed to hours it would have taken with plastic, or even maybe have been impossible with plastic. I didn't know, I didn't try, I didn't even want to waste my time. I can even show you an installation where I wish I thought of this idea. ResoNix Barrier existed back then, but for some reason I just didn't even think of it. This was on a 2018 Ford Mustang. Now, the problem here is, you have a standard, or what looks like a standard, inner door skin access hole. The problem is, what you don't see from this angle is the three-dimensional shapes that run along this. You cannot use standard plastic with one piece to make a block-off plate. What happened here was this multi-piece, multi-layered panel was fabricated in order to block this off so the mid-bass driver could perform properly. Problem is, this took hours to make. You can see all these crazy curves that had to be done. It was honestly just a nightmare to do. You could even see that the door panel had to sit inside of it. Like I said, this took a skilled fabricator hours upon hours to make. Using ResoNix Barrier, it would have taken no more than 30 minutes per door for your average hobbyist to make. So again, if you're gonna do a modern install, or install in a modern vehicle where you're gonna use the door location for your mid-bass driver, consider ResoNix Barrier as your block-off plate solution. I know it's not the most price-friendly thing, but if you value your time and you value your effort, I guarantee you there is no better solution. Thank you for looking, and on to our video. Hi everyone, it's Nick from ResoNix Sound Solutions. It is the day after Luke Ouellet's fall 2024 get-together. Just rolled out of bed, and we realized we never did a little spotlight video on the man himself, Luke Ouellet's install in his GMC AT4. So Luke, it's 11 a.m. We're tired. I know that sounds late, but we were out hanging out. What's going on? What do you got here?
Well, good morning, afternoon, everybody. So this is a 2021 GMC AT4 1500. I have had it since October of 2021. I got it brand new, and the whole origination of me re-entering SQ was because this was a COVID era truck and you could not get Bose with it. And so I started down the classic route of I messaged Crutchfield with a budget of $1,500 and was hoping to build a basic system. And here we are, yeah, exactly pretty much 3 years later to a very different grade of system. But yeah, I started as something very, very casual. The first year I probably built 7 different systems because I was lost and just didn't have sound advice and was listening to anybody who gave me the time of day. And then as time progressed, definitely slowed down, started to make some, I guess, smarter decisions with my money in the vehicle. And now have done some higher level competition and built what I guess I would consider a very high-end system, and feel that I've actually reached, I guess, the end game of what this truck is going to be. I'll probably own it for another couple of years, but I don't intend on really changing anything audio-wise from here on out. But
cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, most of the time people show their trunk, but you don't have a trunk. You have a back seat on your bed. So why don't we go inside and take a look at your back seat amp rack area.
So this is 10 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bucket. And
you sure it's crap?
It has been there's been 2 or 3 amp racks, but this last iteration that I did in preparation for SVR last year was something that I wanted to make more of a showpiece, even though it is completely buried 99% of the time while driving. I wanted to make it pretty functional, most importantly serviceable. So this entire amp rack in just a few minutes comes out and it's completely modular. And it allows me, one, to build the amp rack without being in the truck, which is a huge convenience. And then if I need to service anything, it is very quick to remove. Actually, point in case, this year's SVR, my left F530 unfortunately went down.
This one?
Yep. And thankful to Nick behind the video and Cody Fender in Cincinnati, thank you, gave us a emergency 530 shipment. But because of how the amp rack was built, it took me less than 2 or 3 minutes to replace it, and we were back up and running. Everything's secured with machine bolts and 3D printed clips and clean terminations. So it's just again, it comes down to that serviceability factor.
I'm gonna flip the camera upside down for a second because my tripod gets in the way, but I just want to show how clean all of this really.
Shout out to Daryl, Bob the Bird Turd, as some people know him as, worked with me, and I kind of built this whole thing in CAD before I ever cut or drilled anything. And we worked through a lot of tolerances with what wire I'd be using for 4-gauge, RCAs and speaker wire, plus looming, and making sure that the clips took that into account without compressing it too much, but also holding it stiff so it doesn't vibrate or move around. And so we came with this design that allows me to basically keep a OEM setup when I want to go return the truck, as I've cut nothing in the back of this truck. I've actually really cut nothing in the truck. The whole intention of this build was to be a very OEM integrated look, but also allow it to return to OEM completely when I was done with the truck, which again was probably in a couple of years from now. So
I just realized you have some rear speaker pods here.
I do, I know. Probably the ugliest part of my build, and something I'll maybe
You don't even
explore.
notice them though.
No, they really, once the seat's in there, they're blind. But onto the equipment itself. So we have 3 Mosconi Pro amps, 2 530s on the outer sides, and those run left and right stage respectively, meaning the front stage, so mid-bass is on channels 1 and 2 bridged, and then the mid-range and tweeters are on the high power channels of channel 3 and 4, and then each rear sub, respectively left and right, is on channel 5 of each of the 530s. And then in the center is a 410, and channels 1 and 2 are bridged up to my front sub, which you'll see in a moment, and then channels 3 and 4 run my rear fill. And then the brain of it all, and probably one of the most significant improvements, is the Brax DSP that you see barely fitting in here, but it actually does work. Yeah,
you were down to like the wire on this.
Oh yeah,
my god.
Yeah, there's just enough relief for wires not to pinch, but yeah. And when we flip up the seat here in a second, you'll see even how tight some of the tolerances that are underneath with the RCAs.
Wow.
But this is RCA wise, we use the ResoNix solderless solution, and honestly, it's like if I spent 50 hours on this amp rack roughly, I spent an hour and a half doing RCAs. So if that puts into some level of perspective of how efficient they are, it really is. So under the seat here, you're seeing an MTI stage 2 box with 2 GB12s. And
solid.
so this thing has been sound treated, filled with polyfill, and it probably weighs 150 pounds.
Oh my God, this is really solid.
But I've tried out a few different subs, but for this application, they're in about a cube each, getting whatever the 5th channel at 2 ohms is, I don't know, 700-800 watts out of the 530s.
I think it does 800 watts or something like
yeah,
that.
it's theoretically 1,000, but I don't know. Regardless, they're on minimum gain because they're not the limiting factor of the system on output.
Yeah.
But yeah, in about a cube each, and for a truck in that type of application and what's currently available, it's kind of tough to beat. You got Audio Mobile, who's definitely similar levels of performance, and but I like the GB12 a lot. I recommend it a lot. I've used it a lot, and I don't know. It's the longest lasting speaker in the current setup since the inception of the truck.
Oh yeah, you pretty much got these. You got these a while ago.
Yeah, this was before. It was like 4 3-ways ago, if I can reference it that way. But yeah, these I got real early. As soon as I got my Pro 530s, which again was 2 years ago now, the GB12s came with it, and they've been here ever since. And we've tried some Morel Supremos in here, and
Ultimos.
Ultimos, and not they were here as more of an experiment, but still GB12s, I would take those all day in this type of application at least.
Yeah, I think the Ultimos need more airspace,
power, yeah,
and more power. Yeah,
but no, it's for a truck. There's a few key things that I always will recommend to people, is especially in a sunroofless roof, is a proper sound treatment. My roof is completely dead. It's fully CLD'd, filled with a fiber mat 45 and 25. It is amazing what that does to improve sub bass. And then the second part is, in my truck behind the amps, there's actually the pressure relief vents for airbags and door closing. I have partially sealed those. If there's 10 vents here, I have kept 2, which is enough to let air conditioning open up and doors close and airbags go off. But it really tightens up the sound of sub bass. The equivalent is, I think it goes from sounding like a ported enclosure to sealed. There's a lot less overhang, a lot less chuffing.
Cool.
And but yeah.
So you've had a lot of equipment in this car over the years, like you said, and this is a pretty extreme jump. Especially, this is like a nicer amp rack that I've seen, even including the highest level of professionals. What was your biggest challenge going into this amplifier rack design and installation?
Definitely considerations of width. Width is very tough to make. So there's so much sound and road noise that comes from the back wall if there's not a good seal with the back seat to the back wall. So if you pop out real quick to my back seat, there's just a couple of side flanges that I've removed all of the OEM foam but preserved the outer edges. Those outer edges are really critical to containing the road noise. Like if anyone has ever driven a truck without the back seat cushion in, it is atrociously loud. So having an amp rack that I could preserve that width-wise was a tough fit, especially since I'd already owned the 530s, and I knew I was adding the 410, which was going to push things out. And then the fact that there's clearances for seat brackets that I didn't want to cut, so there's some tolerances. You'll see on your side that I don't use them actively because I have a seat lift, but when I go to return to OEM, I need the ability to secure the rear seat. So there's some tight clearances that have
down
to be
here.
Exactly, I have to maintain those. And
you do have a cutout there.
Yeah.
So what was width was an expected one though.
Yep.
What was something that was unexpected? Maybe something for someone doing something, even not in a truck, just something crazy like this that you learned along the way. That's like, hey, maybe take some word of advice from me. Do or don't do this.
There's definitely, one thing that I wish I would have done on the upper amp rack that I did on the Brax was foam mock-ups. I bought some rigid insulation in order to do some, especially with the seat, because it's you have to do it blind with that rear seat unless you want to permanently take some pieces apart. You can't see how much actual depth clearance you have from the back of the seat to the actual back wall. So depth wise, it took me like 3 or 4 tries of what height I needed to place the amps to actually be able to fit within the seat and not be touching. And because obviously ventilation is some level of a concern, these do well, but I still wanted to have as much air and as much clearance as possible. And they do fine, but it was, I wasted 10, 12 hours when I could have just done some very quick mock-ups and saved myself a lot of heartache. But yeah, I like to do, mock-ups is probably my biggest takeaway from this. That would have saved me a lot of time. And then, but the CAD layout was the inverse of that, is that saved me a ton of time because I was able to draw a lot of things on paper, especially when it came to wiring. That saved me a lot of heartache when I went to actually build it, because it was more of just putting together a Lego set rather than trying to figure out where I was going to route pieces.
Yeah. Well, this is all, everything's like, I don't know if you could see on video, but like everything is labeled and with heat shrink, you know, printed heat shrink. It is just so clean.
I appreciate
so
that.
So clean. This genuinely comes out in like 5 minutes. I guess you just undo these, undo power and ground over there, and it just comes right out.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, it's 2 top left bolts, and then there's one that's behind the power and ground here that goes to an OEM stud, and the rest of it just comes out. Weighs probably 55 pounds, but it's rock solid.
So again, you went from relatively simple setups to this in a pretty quick time, and especially as someone this is your first time really doing car audio in this truck, right?
Car audio, period, really, since I was in high school.
Yeah. So where did the inspiration, or where did the, I don't even know. How does someone who's only done it as a hobbyist for a short period of time come up with the ability and the, thought to do something like this?
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. There's a bit of it is certainly some trial and error, learning a few hard lessons myself of the more expensive is not more better.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think folks know that you and I have a close working relationship when it comes to car audio, and you've been a good mentor, which is a lot of like, whether it's your builds or conversations we've had, and that extends to beyond just you. There's a ton of folks in the community that sensed that I was hopefully heeding their advice and not just trying to get their advice for free. And then
a lot of people will take your advice and do absolutely nothing with it.
Yeah, or this Dunning-Kruger effect that people are just seeking validations for their own ideas, and they will keep searching for somebody to
validate it.
Exactly, and to a certain extent, I was there in the beginning, but I began to slow down, maybe understand a little bit of what is causing a limitation or a challenge, and then starting to work backwards rather than just try to buy something that's more expensive and brute force it through that method. I spent a lot of money and a lot of time that way that I could have circumvented by just thinking about what problem I'm actually trying to solve. So, but hundreds and hundreds of hours of research as well. And I have a fairly creative mind. I've worked with my hands a lot of my life, whether it's on the side. I grew up in construction, so I did a fair amount of woodworking in my younger 20s.
Usually construction guys aren't doing the greatest work. This is definitely different than that.
But I don't know, it's kind of this culmination of a lot of my favorite hobbies, and music is always the driving factor, but the fact that I get to work with my hands and give me something that gives me this much satisfaction has been a huge driving factor, and I don't really notice the hours go by unless I'm doing fiberglass.
Yeah, fiberglass is not fun. So you mentioned, slowing down and like taking more appropriate steps along the way. But earlier you mentioned this bad boy, the Brax DSP, being probably one of the biggest upgrades you made. Tell me, what did you have before this? What did you experience going in, or not even what did you experience, what did you expect going into it? And then what did you experience based on the switch?
So there is, we'll get up front in a second, but there was, so in terms of progression, we started out as no DSP, had a Helix V8, which kind of plunged me into the realization of the power of DSP and obviously the Helix functionality. And then we went from that up to the Helix DSP Pro MK3, which was another step up and allowed a lot more flexibility with amps. And then we had made some significant upgrades to the front stage. And one thing that I had left that weekend with was a few recommendations from you and Matt about what are the next pieces that would take this to another level. And that was front sub, Brax DSP, and rear fill location. And we ended up taking all three pieces of those advice, and they all made, especially front sub and Brax, made significant improvements. But the Brax, I had an expectation that I was expecting some more separation and
Maybe just like a cleaner sound.
yeah, like honestly, I was trying to manage my expectations with it because it's an investment, and I didn't want to get buyer's remorse or set some unrealistic expectations. But I essentially got it. I took my Pro MK3 tune one for one and routed it into the Brax, and it was immediately noticeable. There's the phenomenon with stage width and separation that is the two most definable characteristics that you immediately notice a difference from other DSPs. And even the Pro MK3, which is an excellent DSP, this is a new ball game. And if you ever get a chance to put this on a home system, that is like a tenfold difference. You can really identify the differences in the quality of what is in those DSPs compared to others. And then it's just been rock solid reliable. It can cook an egg on it, but it's never overheated, it's never shut down. And yeah, now, and then since they've added virtual channel flexibility, it's, I'll call it future-proof for now. It's got the flexibility that it was missing in terms of integration.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I don't think this is a processor you even use for, I'm going to do OEM integration and call it a day. I don't even think that's this type of processor. You'd almost be wasting it if that was the case. Mm-hmm. But it is, I noticed the exact same thing. When I bench tested it against the Pro Mark II, I think it was, years ago, when the Brax first came out, I thought the difference was going to be minimal, and it really wasn't. Again, not to say the Pro Mark II, Pro Mark III, whatever, are not good processors. They're up there with the other best models on the market, but this Brax really is a pretty damn significant upgrade. It's pretty impressive.
It's one of the few pieces that is going to travel with me for the foreseeable future from vehicle to vehicle. Until there's a dramatic...
Until they come out with the Brax Mark II.
Exactly. All right. So,
all right, I guess let's hop in the front.
All right.
Yeah.
So before I jump in, if you want to, we'll do front sub, which was the other upgrade we were just talking about. So we have an Illusion C10 up front, which was probably get remade just to be a little more comfortable for the passenger this winter. But it is a fiberglass enclosure I made. This was my first plunge into personal project with fiberglass, and it was a full sprint of a weekend, but it was one of those things that we spent dozens of hours planning, and then it just came down to putting the pieces together. I didn't have to think too much when I came to fabrication, but that's in about 0.6 cubic feet, which is much more than it needs. But it allows this, if I wanted to run this, it plays down to 25 hertz without any EQ, which is, it's a fun little phenomenon, but it still likes to have some rear sub to complement those low lows. But you're not going to find, if you could find one of these to put in your car, as a front sub, you're not going to beat it. Low inductance, very light cone, stiff cone. It acts basically as a giant mid bass that kicks like a mule.
Yeah.
It is, as Nick knows and a few others know, if you can find it, it is the way to go when it comes to a front sub. But that is a game changer, especially in a GM truck or truck in general that really struggles with door mounted mid bass below 80 hertz, and I would say even below 90. this takes the treble frequencies out of the doors, puts them into a much more rigid mounting, sealed piece of hardware that doesn't
better
struggle.
Location too.
That too
Yeah.
is this plays without cancellation from 25 to I think about 220. And yeah, there's probably 3 filters on this front sub, most of which is just the cutout top end and low end. But yeah, that is something I would highly recommend if you want to really start to push the limits. But in a truck, it really helps. The front doors have Focal 8WMs in them, and they are playing the smallest passband of any speaker in here. They are, I think, playing 95 to 185 at this point. But while it's necessary, they work well in terms of location for width. Again, doors are difficult, but we sound true to the crap out of them, and they don't really make any noise. They certainly don't have any resonance, or any major resonance, I should say. But yeah, they work fine enough. They're rigidly mounted, and not too much more to say about that. But
yeah. So you had, obviously most of us watching probably already are familiar with your truck. Before we even get into all of this, actually, you know what? Let's get into what do you have here, and tell us more about it. We'll get into the old stuff later.
Yeah. So
what's going on here?
We have the Accuton midrange, the C100AM, and the C30AM, which are the automotive versions of the Accuton drivers. And they are housed in some very cool custom pillars built by the man behind the camera and Mr. Matt Kim. And they were a weekend project of ours that they were originally actually an MTI pillar that we modified, which is another good advantage for sound quality in these trucks, is to get rid of the grab handle. And so MTI had a good kit, and we just took that a little bit further and decided on using these drivers because I was going to be I had just upgraded to Focal Utopia, and me and Nick knew we were building pillars, and
I showed up to the shop and I was like, you sure this is the last time you're really doing this? And I was like, they're right here.
And we did it. And it was honestly, that was the best decision that I didn't have to make almost for myself. And I'm so happy that I did. It's not that there's like this blow your socks back change out of the water compared to Utopia. These speakers definitely do things that most, if not all, other speakers cannot. But for my personal taste, they're exactly what I was hoping they would do. There's no other mid-range 3.5 that I know that is going to play down to 175 at 125, 130 dB without worrying, and play cleanly without distortion.
Yeah.
And same goes for the tweeter. But yeah, I feel one of the primary motivators of me keeping this truck longer than I probably should are these pillars. I feel very lucky every day that I come into this truck, and not just trying to hype up. I consider them essentially artwork, and
They are probably the nicest pillars I've ever had my hands on.
It's the
I just remember sanding this and making this little ridge.
It was like
sanding to
organized
make this
chaos of the whole assembly process. It was so fun to be like an accessory to that. And every time I have somebody ask me about the mid-range placement and location of okay, why did you choose the location as it was? And there's definitely some conscious science about it and massive advantages of bringing mid-range up close to the windshield, most importantly, and this aiming helped. But the nature of the aiming is a little bit of knowing that we were going to put the speaker close to the windshield as we could. This is basically the only physical location you could fit the driver in the OEM GM piece that is removable.
Oh yeah, that was partially, that angle is partially because we kind of had to.
Correct. It was like, it happened.
It wasn't even like a sound thing. It was like, this is the only way this is fitting.
Correct. And I remember we were trying to CA glue those first rings in there, and it was extremely tight to be able to maintain that mid-range, because you have a 2 3/4 that's in there in stock,
right up against the pillar.
and still be able to have a pillar that would slip behind it. So we essentially chopped the bottom of the pillar off, and then from there we completely built it out of fiberglass and a combination of some laser cut trapezoids and rings, and then I don't know, dozens of hours of hand sanding to get that shape that you see here, and ended up with yeah.
I think that was the last set of pillars I ever built.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I will probably never build pillars again, because those killed me. They completely burnt me out on all things fabrication. I was like, after that, I was like, I'm done.
I think we did like 3 18-hour, 19-hour days in a row on these, and then drove back through a snowstorm, but it was well worth it.
Yeah, it was a fun weekend.
But yeah, there's been we started here with an Infinity tweeter, then Audiofrog GS, then Audiofrog GB, then went to Blam, Multics, then to Morel MM3 with the Piccolo, then to Focal Utopia, and here we are. And this was in the course of like 9 months. Do not do what I do. That was such a short-sighted way when I refer earlier of the buy more expensive, better to fix your problems.
So what's your word of advice that you would give to anyone looking to, maybe someone who's interested in car audio like this, but maybe not like, they're like, I don't want to go that deep, but what would you suggest to them, going into something like that?
I think it's, one, don't buy anything until you hopefully get a chance. If you're, with the exception of being in a very rural area, it is worth a 4 or 5 hour trip to a get together. Like I host a couple here in New England, both in the fall and spring, and there's plenty that are sprinkled throughout the U.S. or competition, and have the opportunity to listen to a few vehicles and talk to a few people, and begin to understand expectations, because a lot of people don't know how to manage their expectation when it comes to this, because they have no frame of reference, and often feel a bit lost when it comes to speaker selection or equipment selection or what to do with their particular vehicle. And especially as they get more complicated with time, it becomes even more difficult to make those decisions. But I would absolutely try to reach out or physically see some builds and listen, and begin to formulate your own opinions of what you have listened to, and hopefully talk to some people that know what they're talking about, which can be tough, but there's a lot of folks out there that are willing to help, willing to let you listen, and that would be my first stop, and that allows you to try before you buy, and that can save you a lot of heartache. I also recommend buy once, cry once. Once you know what you want, I would much rather people do a phased install with the equipment and locations and labor required to get it right.
Yeah, even just wait. It's the same. I tell people the same thing: buy once, cry once. Do your install one time, and you will save yourself way more money, way more time, way more hassle, way more broken shit along the way. It's just so much better. I would rather wait an extra year, keep my car stock, and wait a year as opposed to just getting something in there.
Correct.
I would much rather.
That is my. I almost fell out of love with car audio the second year I was really into it, because it was just, I felt like I was chasing my tail. I was definitely getting in my own way, but having now spent enough time around it and enough people involved, I would absolutely have done nothing for a year and a half, and just planned and then gone full bore into what I have today.
Full bore crazy.
Yeah. That and sound treat your vehicles really well. Like that is, like, I'm not trying to toot Nick's horn or anybody, is like the importance of sound treating your vehicle properly can't be understated. Is like I would, if you have a $5,000 budget and you're not accommodating at least $1,000 of that or 1,500 of it to sound treatment, you're shooting yourself in the foot for the capability of your system, the comfort of your vehicle, and the impact of what resonance and rattles will do to the perception of what your system is, or the capabilities of what it's able to do, can be crippling. So it's something that even people who do not have sound systems that have loud cars. My wife's got a Subaru Crosstrek that is like driving a tin can, and we are going to put sound treatment in it probably before we do anything else, because it is so much more comfortable to drive once you have a vehicle that is well deadened.
Yeah. You know, it's funny that I realized, not to like make this about me for a second, but all of the people that have experience with it always say the exact same thing you just said. They're like, do not understate proper, good sound treatment. And the people that don't have experience with it, or don't have the hands-on, or don't have, like, you know, frankly, anything good to really show against it, they don't really think of it, they don't mention it, or they even just go online like, no, you don't need to do anything that crazy. But everyone who actually has the hands-on experience is like, yeah, make sure you do it. Like, make sure you do it well, because it's very well worth it.
And the devil's in the details. It's not just slapping CLD on the outside of the skin. It's the butyl rope and your switches. It's the Testa tape on where panels meet. It's the CCF to decouple plastic panels into metal. It's the whole
everything.
kit apart. So
yeah, resonance is distortion.
Yeah.
Remember that. And everyone wants to swaps. You know, Luke can buy these very, very expensive speakers that have less than 1% distortion in their bandwidth. But what is less than 1% distortion speakers if your car itself is creating more distortion than you know what to do with? So, yeah. So anyways, what else do we got here? What do you think, outside of going from like the Utopias to these, what do you think like was the biggest step along the way before that?
the first time I had U-Tune with my Blams, it was like that. At the meetup today, yesterday, there was probably 4 or 5 cars that had a lot, like so much left on the table with what equipment and install they had that were missing because of somebody has never extracted the potential of their system through tuning. Mm-hmm. And my vehicle has now been tuned by, with the exception of Miguel, who I'm sure we'll get a crack at it at some point. I think it has been tuned by, let's call it, every large tuner, maybe the Myers as well, but you got Jeff has tuned this, Nick has tuned this, Peter has tuned this, Shannon has tuned this. The list is long, but the importance of, once you get somebody who is a capable tuner, that really showed me that was probably actually the crux. Even though I bought Morel and Utopia shortly after that, it went to really show me that tuning is, again, if you had a $5,000 budget, if you're not including a quality tune in that budget, you are leaving a lot on the table. So I would definitely be an advocate of setting aside some time, whether you want to learn tuning yourself or not. That is completely up to you. But there is just so much opportunity in modern DSP technology to improve the sound of what you have that it is intimidating for the first timer to begin to explain and understand what tuning is and what a DSP is. But again, it's one of those, go to a meetup, I have a preset in here that is set to just crossovers and a bit of level matching. And then I turn it on for clients to show the power of what EQ, time alignment does. And it is eye-opening to most people because it is such a large change.
Yeah.
So speaking
of processing, I guess, you have your Helix conductor right down here, which is nice and convenient considering you have your armrest, you have your conductor, easy to use, easy to access. You have your digital audio player right here, easy to use, easy to access, but you also still have Apple CarPlay going.
Yep.
So all of this works with, pretty much really good function as well. The biggest problem I see in a lot of high-end cars is, none of the radio, no Apple CarPlay, no Android, no nonsense, like none of that, just digital audio player or a tablet or, some whatever device with a volume controller. And it's just, to me, it's just like so not functional in a daily driver. Did you take any precautions or did you take any steps to make sure you still had functionality with such a setup?
Yep. Yeah. So I probably have more sources than you would ever need in a vehicle, but it was one of those things that when I was running wires, let's run it in the beginning. So I do have high level still integrated into this. There's a harness that plugs in under the glove box back to the DSP that allows me to maintain, because my phone is still Bluetooth to my head unit. So the Helix Auto or Brax Auto swaps to my head unit, allows me to preserve that if I ever need to use chimes or AM, FM.
Navigation features.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you're navigating, voice still can come over that.
Precisely. Then I have a Bluetooth card in the Brax, so which I actually been using more often than not if I don't have an album on my DAP and I don't feel like tethering wireless to that. I stream Bluetooth and it sounds honestly great. Just like I gave a few demos, did not tell people.
Less of a difference than most people. It's less of a difference than pretty much everyone makes out. I'd be willing to bet people aren't really going to notice a difference.
I gave like 4 demos through Bluetooth yesterday. Didn't tell anybody.
The amount of people that comment on my videos that like mention, oh, Bluetooth is crap, or they comment on like any of my posts like that don't even really have anything to do with that. I just mention like the Bluetooth capabilities, or we discuss the word Bluetooth. Like you get all these people in the comments that just go, oh, Bluetooth, it's crap, you got to use it. And it's like, dude, shut up. You really clearly haven't even tried for yourself.
Like measure the high level signal of a GM, Bose or non-Bose.
No, even ignore that. Like, let's go direct Bluetooth to the Brax versus, coaxial with the FiO or analog with the FiO. The difference is really, really, really not that much.
It really is not.
And I guarantee you we're gonna get people on this in the comment section of this video that are like, you guys are clearly idiots, or they're gonna be thinking to themselves, you guys are clearly idiots. But like, I'm willing to bet you take that person who's thinking that and blind test them, and they are not going to be able to tell, or hardly are going to be able to tell.
Agreed. It is. And if you're driving on the road, you're joking.
I actually disagree with that one.
Oh, really?
Not with the fact that, with Bluetooth, but like I disagree with the whole driving on the road thing. I see a lot of people saying like, oh, all that quality, goes out the window when you start driving. Not really. Yes, there's more floor noise, like there's more noise in the vehicle, but it doesn't take away the quality of what you have, especially at volume, because it's very easy to overcome the volume of road noise with volume of a system if you have a capable system. I've, all the differences that I've made in my car, I've never found, it to be like, oh, beneficial while I'm parked, and then I start driving, I'm like, it doesn't really do that much while I'm driving. I've never once noticed that or thought that in any which way.
It's a very common comment I see about Brax DSP is that people undermine that when it comes to driving, and thinking that you won't hear the difference.
You mentioned the biggest thing you noticed was width and separation.
Yeah, that doesn't go away when you're driving down the road.
When you drive, it doesn't take away your width. It doesn't take away stereo separation. It doesn't take away tightness of imaging. It doesn't take away less distortion. It doesn't take away tonal characteristics. It's just added to the mix.
Exactly.
There's noise added to the mix. But would you say when you heard the Brax and then you were like, oh my God, this is great. And then you started driving, like, it's not really worth it.
It certainly was not the reality. It was still
just
as
think
impressive.
That once.
No, absolutely.
Probably didn't even pop
It's
in
just
your
as
head.
impressive. Like, that's not how I bought the Brax. The mentality I bought it with, that it would be, oh, this is for competition and shows only when I'm parked. No, I bought this for how I'm going to use the system and drive around with it 99% of the time.
Okay. So, there is so much stuff to talk about in here. What do we want to discuss next? Is there anything that we haven't gone over yet?
I will say that the GM platform is getting more difficult to work with.
The modern ones.
Yeah. This particular era of 2019 to 2022 is probably, certainly when it comes to the dash, is much better and much easier. So anybody considering a truck, it's also very friendly to work with dash locations. That's the biggest gripe I have with F-150s, is that there is no great factory dash location to work with. It's always buried down in the door. So if you are considering and you want to keep a truck as your primary platform, whether it's your career or you just prefer to drive trucks, this generation actually works pretty well.
I would agree.
I think there's...
I've worked on F-150s, I've worked on Rams, I've worked on the new GMs, I've worked on Chevys, I've worked on all of them. And I was actually sitting here while you were talking, just looking like, wow, this is actually much better than all the other trucks. The new GMs I've had my hands on, and they are not, let's just say they are not fun to do a high-end sound system in.
No.
It's not a good platform. It went from a good platform to an atrocious platform pretty quickly.
Like, it's an OEM plus platform at this point without, and even then, it's just the front side of those trucks is much more difficult to work with comparatively. The back is still the same, but the front end of it is they made, obviously it's not a major consideration for them when they're building trucks is sound quality, but and the trucks have continued to deteriorate in terms of any sort of sound treatment, not that they really come with any anyways, but it is just like I said, I coming from a company that we had every generation GM truck from mid 2000s to now. That is the biggest takeaway that I get when I put people who have driven trucks is that, okay, this has 50,000 miles in here and there's no rattles, there's no nothing. That it feels like you're driving a Cadillac or Mercedes down the road as I put people in the back and we're having conversations at highway speeds at the same volumes that we're talking now. That's something I take a lot of pride in that one, especially coming from a truck with 33-inch tires, is like the fact that it can be that quiet on the road. But it does come with a lot of time spent to sound treat it. But
what was the biggest upgrade with sound treatment in this truck?
Roof, 100%.
What did you notice?
Road noise, obviously sub-bass performance, but the transfer of road noise is significantly reduced. With
like overhead wind noise and stuff like that.
And there's that. And then I would say the second biggest difference in terms of like operation was actually putting fiber mat inside of the doors. I notice it because the bottom of my B-pillars are not treated, and it is so obvious now, the transfer of noise, where I do not have fiber mat. I need to just go there and stuff it, but it is very, very clear when you have that isolating layer in there. But yeah, obviously I think everybody sound treats their front doors, pending they have mid-bass in there. So I kind of glaze over that in terms of being a necessary improvement that you have to make, but in terms of other big impressions is roof, and then adding a fibrous product. But my dash is, besides some fiber mats stuff behind those speakers, it's a completely OEM dash. I didn't take this apart to sound treat it for rattles. It doesn't make noise, even with a front sub stuffed under it. I'm fortunate in that regard. Not a lot of vehicles are like that, but yeah.
So you're always talking about upgrades. What is the next upgrade?
A new car. To be honest,
you mentioned a new sub enclosure for the front.
Yeah, I'm going to rework the front sub because I'm here sitting 6'2" with a seat all the way back, and my wife is a lot shorter than I am, so it's not as big of a deal, but this 90-degree angle that is sitting on my feet is not comfortable. So I'm going to redo the front sub, and I'm going to try my hand at doing a firewall loaded front sub. Which I got to experience a couple at the meetup. I've seen obviously Ryan Mitchell's and a few others that have done it that way in competition, and it works very successfully.
My car has it. Kind of.
Right. And so there should be some advantages, maybe perhaps crossing the front sub a little bit lower, which will help from some tactile feel from behind me on my rear subs. But it is more as much of a comfort piece to actually put some angle on that enclosure so it's a bit more comfortable for my wife who sits in here very commonly. So that is probably my last project in here.
Well, you mentioned comfort, and you mentioned having the truck for a couple more years, but in previous conversations you've mentioned to me, I'm going to cut the rear and do big old infinite baffle subs, and I'm going to cut the kick panels and move the mid basses down there. What's the thought process behind that? What's going on there?
There is, so as like I'm running Pete's toot in here, and Peter and I have had some pretty lengthy conversations when it comes to after you tune this truck and kind of extracting those last few percentile. And while there's still some percentage left on the table, based on how I'm going to own this truck, I've really gone back and forth heavily over the past 2 months of whether I was going to do IB kicks, because midbass is probably still the most native, natural problem in here in terms of just inherent frequency response and location. But is it detracting so much away that I can't enjoy my system? No.
Not even close.
Exactly.
Honestly.
And so the fact that I've come to terms with that the fact that I probably will only own this truck for another 18 months, maybe 2 years, and resale value is important, because these trucks depreciate the top end fast, but they hold depreciation until they really hit the 10-year mark, and then it falls off. So for me, my intention, until I'm in a financial position to
I'm sorry, I'm just watching Barbara eat grass right now over there. I don't know if anyone can see, but Luke has the most adorable little pug that is just having a blast over there in your backyard.
Oh, she's a vegetarian when she's outside.
I don't know what she's doing, but she's having a good time. Anyway, sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good. So, IB kicks have come off the table, because again, I don't want to compromise my firewall. Plus, just the probably 100 hours of labor to me for the few percentile gain is just. While I do enjoy that process and love learning fabrication, I will do it probably in either my next vehicle or a second vehicle that I purpose build for sound quality, which will probably be an older vehicle. Like I'd love to buy a mid-2010s Mercedes that has a lot of good locations to work with, and I won't feel guilty about cutting a vehicle up. And then when it comes to rear sub, again, is I'm not missing to go gain output at 11 to 15 hertz in those little bit cleaner subsonics down there. Again, is that worth
losing the value of your truck and all of the time going into it and your back seat and all of that? Is it worth it? My opinion, no.
Not for if I was committing to this vehicle for 5 years, for like 5 to 6 years, where depreciation is a non-factor with it, would not bother it. I wouldn't not hesitate, because I wouldn't want to sit on the fence for 5 years of like wondering what if.
Yeah.
2 years, different story. And the fact that I after Pete recently tuned this, I've never enjoyed my truck this much. Basically, when the Accutons went in, that was a huge, between the tune you had done and just that upgrade and kind of bringing everything together.
11 p.m. tune rushing through. I think that was the last time I really had my hands on it.
It was. That was the first time that was the last time you full tuned my truck ever. Like it's always been like a
after
here.
3 days of like, ugh.
That level, I went out to my truck very commonly to the driveway to listen after that. And then this recent iteration, now that I've had, since that, there's been major changes since Nick last tuned it, which was front sub, Brax, and rear fill.
I didn't even tune it with the front sub. I guess I did touch-ups at SVR 2 years ago. But yeah.
And, and then, so Pete recently tuned it, and it's been exceptional. Nick just got a chance to listen to it. And
it is very, very, the way I described it to him, I was like, oh, it finally sounds like my car.
and it's true. It's a very, it's a very similar, it's almost identical, besides the difference in effects of what the cabin does to staging and depth. They're almost identical. But the fact what I'm coming back to is that I am in love with how my truck sounds. I haven't turned my 2-channel system on at home since I came back from SVR, and I was horny as all hell about 2-channel. When I first got the Kefs in my living room, I was listening to those every night. Now I come out 5 nights a week to listen to my truck, and I just smile and get chills and goosebumps and the shivers. And to me, until that feeling falls off dramatically, and even then, there's no reason for me to make.
And I think honestly, with how it sounds now, if that feeling falls off, you're never gonna get. It's kind of like heroin. You're chasing a dragon that's not doesn't exist.
Agreed.
You know, the level that this is playing at, the level at like the cars, like your car, my car, like these level of cars, like you're really not making much improvement from there. Like the little baby upgrades you can do, as you said, require 100+ hours for proper kick panels with permanent modification to the vehicle or permanent modification to the rear of the cabin. Like, and it's just like, oh, for what? Like a tiny little baby upgrade, and it's just.
And I like competition, but it is not the end all be all. Like that's. If I was,
but I won first place, so my car's obviously incredible, right?
You don't need to have a. You can still exactly
that number on my score sheet is clearly says that I am an authority on what to say.
It is exactly. It's like it's so easy to chase
competitor out there.
It's like they win and then.
This equipment's really good. I've been getting first and second place all year with this equipment. That must mean it's really good, right?
Absolutely. It's like this. Is take everything with a grain of salt. There is great advice and there is reasoning to do some of those things, but you have to, I urge everybody to take a step back and think about beyond audio for a second when you come to those levels of decisions. And then do you possess the skills? Either do you possess the skills to be able to actually successfully implement it, or do you possess the funds to hire somebody who can? And if not, if either of those questions are answered no,
And I want to add last thing before I guess we get out of here. I'll answer that for you. All right. Sorry, my battery died as I was about to start talking. Something I want to add. Luke was saying, I think you were saying, do you have the skills to pull off crazy installs like that, or do you possess the funds to pay someone who can pull off those? And something I have noticed out of 95+% of people that I've seen take on projects like that, the answer is no. People really don't realize what it takes to, cut a kick panel up and properly build, baffle for it and, secure everything correctly without ending up with more problems than what a simple but good door installation really is. Or cutting up a dashboard in a way that you have to remove the dash and service it and blah, blah, blah. Perfect example is I will just, he's doing a great job. And I gave him some advice on how he can prevent something like this. Perfect example is Carson's Porsche Macan that was there. Mm-hmm. I asked him off camera, I was like, hey, how long does it take you to service those dash mid-ranges? And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, if you need to let's say there's a bad connection, or let's say a speaker blows or something, you just want to upgrade speakers. I was like, how long does it take you to get those out? He was like, 5 hours.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
I was like, excuse me? He's like, yeah, to get the dash top out, the last time I did it, it took me, he's like, I'm getting faster, and it took me 5 hours. I was like, dude, that's just to remove it? He's like, yeah. And I was like, Jesus Christ. I was like, all right, so next time, do this. You did the work up front to get it all done, but so you can make it serviceable, do it this way instead. And Carson is capable of the fabrication. He just didn't have the experience to know how to, look ahead and maybe make it a little bit more serviceable. And I gave him a little idea on how I did the dash pods or dash little panels in my car, where I can get them out in less than 5 minutes, and drop in speakers like nothing. And it's more than just serviceability. It's again, pulling it off in a way, I had someone, we did this little experiment this weekend with the front sub and mid bass, mating up to the mid-range drivers, where this guy called me. He's like, I want to emulate, a really crazy build in my car. I want to do, infinite baffle, 10-inch front sub through the firewall, and big beefy 8-inch mid basses, infinite baffle, and the kicks are under the seat. And I want to do, he's like, but the knolls from the mid bass drivers, under the seat that I have now, makes me want to do 6-inch drivers in the dashboard. And I was like, whoa, stop, slow down. I was like, who are you? Honestly, who are you? What I mean by that is are you capable of fabricating that, you know, and I was like, I don't mean like, who are you? Like, who do you think you are? I mean, like, who are you? Because like, if you're capable of pulling that off, I'm pretty sure I would have like known you by now. Like, obviously there's people that are plenty capable that I don't know, but it's, you know, a pretty small community. It's a very small circle of people that are capable of genuinely pulling off stuff like that. And like, even for me pulling that off, that is difficult to nail without any issues. And I've done it before, and I know I'm good, and it's like, it's still very difficult, and I'd still probably shy away from it for an easier route because of all of the little issues that can pop up. You know, I started asking him, I was like, okay, cool. You can either do like the 3.5 mids in the factory like panel and make it super quick, super serviceable, literally a 1-day job, and have a really good end result. Or you can pull out your dashboard, you can cut it up, you can put the dashboard back in, you can start figuring out mounting locations and angles, you can pull the dashboard back out, you can build some enclosures. Next thing you know, you're doing fiberglass. Fiberglass can have all sorts of problems. You know, I've seen it, I mentioned it yesterday to you, you know, where someone's was complaining to me, oh, my kick panels rattle and resonate. It turns out the layers of fiberglass are delaminated somewhere. You know, you can run into it like with Chris Pierce's Charger when it was at my shop and we were tuning it. The one side, the right side dash enclosure of the mid-range was super duper resonant in like a way that like, I was like, dude, this is never going to sound okay. And we had to take measures at my shop before we even continued tuning it. It's just stuff like that. And then you have to deal with the maintenance of all of this. And then again, like at the end of the day, is it a car that you're driving and you just want to enjoy, or is this a car that you're doing to impress people on the internet? Like, what really is it?
I almost make the point of like, when you get to, if audio is that important to you, and you're willing to put that level of effort, like how important is the car to you that you're currently driving, where the time value proposition is most likely cheaper to buy a different vehicle that works better for the goals that you're trying to get to than it is to modify the one that you have. As crazy as that may sound.
I actually bought my Volvo for the platform that it is.
And that's exactly as like, you can do a lot with. To me, I would recommend that approach. At least people take that real consideration if you're going to think about that level of a system or that level of fabrication, and you don't feel 100% confident in yourself and see the way through it. I mean, I guess to just end it off, like there are, when it comes to those larger, crazier installations, there are 101 steps you have to take in order to get to that end result. Realistically, probably more than 101 steps. I'm just using a funny number. And each step along the way, something can go wrong that an inexperienced mind or inexperienced set of hands will not recognize, not realize, or not know how to deal with. And you will end up with something that is worse than a simpler install. And it happens damn near every time I see a hobbyist who doesn't really have a ton of fabrication experience go buck wild with their dashboard or their kick panels or their trunk or whatever. It's just, you know, most of the time it really doesn't pay off. So yeah, I just wanted to like, I don't want to like, it's not like we're trying to preach or discourage people. It's just
be careful of wasting your time, wasting your money.
Exactly.
You know, I see people do it all the time, and the last thing I want is to see people like put all of this time and effort and like they're so excited. And this happened, the reason I'm so passionate about it is because it happened to me. I went berserk in my project car years ago, not knowing what I was doing, not knowing how things worked, just doing crazy shit because I saw people on the internet doing it, not really fully having an understanding of it. And the car ended up unusable and I had to sell it. I mean, I didn't have to sell it. I actually sold it to put a deposit on my first shop. But like, I look back at it, I'm like, that never would have been worth fuck all. It would have been a train wreck if I finished it and actually tried to do anything with it.
Like if you're lucky enough to get somebody to buy an NESQ chopped up car, is like you're talking.
I'm selling my Volvo right now.
Exactly.
You know, my Volvo is for sale for anyone watching. And it's actually funny, you were saying it might be cheaper to buy a better platform as opposed to making all these crazy changes. That's how I think I have a buyer for the car. We're still discussing it. And, you know, he called me just looking for advice on like designing a really high-end system using, you know, Accuton or micro precision stuff. And, you know, I was like, he's like, oh, should I use my Grand Cherokee or should I buy a different car to put it in? I was like, whoa, like, okay, like you actually don't have a specific vehicle you want to put this in. I was like, I'm going to make an offer to you. Buy my car. It'll be better, it'll be quicker, and it'll be cheaper than doing what you want to do. And he was like, whoa, really? Okay, let's talk. And we're still in the middle of figuring things out. But, you know, it's not sold yet. So if anyone wants it, it's still here. But yeah, the reason I'm selling, I don't really drive anymore. And I think I just need to get a simpler car. And, you know, like I said, I drive maybe 1,000 miles a year. This is the most I've driven.
I was going to say.
This is the most I've driven.
50% of your miles are coming to my meetup in the spring and fall.
I work from home, so it's like, what is the point?
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, I don't know. I guess any last words, any thank yous, anything?
Yeah, definitely. So shout out to definitely, obviously yourself. You've like, no BS aside, have mentored me through this process, and whether I've taken your advice or left it on the table.
No, you take it.
I do now. I definitely take a lot more consideration. Huge shout out to Pete. Pete has helped me a lot over the years as well. It's not just recently from SVR, but obviously he did a great job of extracting a lot out of the system. And shout out to Miguel for coming up to my meetup. We had a ton of great conversations and just a great dude. But shout out to everybody that actually comes to my meetup. So like, the day is always a huge sprint. If you're in New England, I highly recommend coming up. We have a blast. We usually have 30 to 40 cars, every time. But it makes a lot of this hobby worth it. Like I'm at the point now where I enjoy competition, but it is about the social scene and the friends that I've made in this industry. They're almost an extended family to me at this point because of how much I've invested myself into this hobby. I've invested into the relationships that exist in it. And there's been a lot of great people that separate the audio side of it. They're just a lot of people I enjoy being around and spending time with. And it's one of the big reasons that I go to the events and host the meetups is that I hope people are getting some good value out of coming to the meetups or just enjoying to be around the people that show up. And so that's something that I was never planning on having a fall meetup, but I just exactly. I just wanted to have some people around and share and everybody showed up and everybody's always very helpful. So thank you to all the folks that have helped me and all the people that do show up for those types of events. And I wouldn't still be as passionate and heavy into this hobby as I am now.
Yeah. Every year I'm like, there's no way I'm driving 6 hours up to Maine to go to this thing. And then as it gets closer, I'm like, the last one was fun though. And then like 3 days before, I'm like, fuck, I guess I'll go.
And then we have a blast and do stuff like this.
Yeah, then we have a blast. So. But yeah, anything else?
No, I'll see you guys next season.
All right. Thank you, Luke.
See you guys.